Hello, marketers. This is the Funnel Lab. Welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. Funnel Lab Fridays, if you haven't heard about us before, is a weekly live session where we dive into use cases and challenges data-savvy marketers face. I am your co-host, Doug Bell, CMO of Caliber Mind. If you tune in a couple weeks, you'll see Eric Westerkamp, our CEO, as host. I've got some pretty cool guests today. Joining me are Nadia Davis, Senior Director of Revenue Marketing and MarOps at Payit, and returning to the show, Misha Salkinder, Director of Customer Data Strategy here at Caliber Mind. Got a cool topic for you today. We're going to be talking about how to help organizations transition from a lead-based to an account-based system. So let's call that MQLs to MQAs to achieve ABM success. So Nadia and Misha, welcome. Misha, welcome back.
Thank you.
Nadia, welcome. First time on the show. Tell us about yourself and your role at Payit.
Hey, Doug. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I love a good marketing conversation when it's marketing, performance marketing or marketing ops, that's even better. So I'm Nadia Davis, and I lead revenue marketing and MarOps teams at Payit. Payit is a technology for government SaaS business. So for those of you in technology marketing, you can relate very much to the world that I live in. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, Nadia, I'm glad you're here because I feel like this conversation keeps popping up for me a lot. And I know you live in this world, but I'll start us off by talking about a declaration in 2010s from Forrester when they declared the MQL dead. And when I saw this, I agreed. And I think it's a simple idea, but it's really hard to apply given that for the 15 years prior, B2B marketers and sellers sort of train on this idea of the funnel and optimizing the funnel and this idea of sort of the lead being the center of the world. And that persists, right? And quite often, it's funny, I felt like sellers were the folks that were sort of the first to adapt to this and are sort of the folks that are struggling to make the change sometimes. So how is this showing up to you? How is this challenge showing up for you at Payit, Nadia?
I love these radical declarations that something is dead and something is alive and you have to change your world around it, right? But if we think about what an MQL is, or what it was, the definition of what it was back, say, in 2010 and around that time, right? People related a form fill to a ready to buy, ready to talk to you person. When in reality, like you want to download a report, you don't really know what's in that report, but they're asking you for your first name, last name, and email address, and you have to give it to get the report, right? And then sellers figured out, okay, so marketing sends me these lists of MQLs that I need to follow up with. And I keep calling, and these people just don't want to talk to me. Of course, MQL is dead. None of this is working. These are bad leads, right? So that kind of caused this rift between marketing and sales. When in reality, when you think about an MQL is really a leading indicator of something as opposed to an actionable trigger of someone ready to talk to you. So, as I look at this evolution of going from leads to the notion of account-based marketing, if you think about this cyclical motion of how it used to be or has been for so long, for some businesses is still true today. You start with a lead. As a seller, you get someone who filled out a form or somehow the organization procured the name for. You follow up, nothing there. You figure out that you need to look at other things. Then you start stacking onto this. Let me see what other actions this lead took. Did they look at the website? Did they come to us at an event? Then that turns out to be not enough. You start looking at, okay, is this the right title to begin with? Then you add the ICP fit. Then you add other people within the company, this concept of persona and kind of buying group buying, right? And you can arrive at this concept of qualifying an account without anybody even saying account-based marketing at the time. So the seller's kind of going through the motions. They already figured out that the path to success is to make sure the whole ecosystem is aligned before someone talks to me. And if you live that life every day, you figure this out pretty quickly, right? So, multiple tools came about with ABM and the things that you can do and teaching you this concept of account-based marketing, when in reality, account-based marketing is pretty much the reverse motion of what I just described. You look at the qualified accounts. Now, that's your first step, right? In the lead motion, that was your last step. Here, it's the first step. Then you start peeling back intent, behavioral actions, visits to the site, who are the ICP titles? Do I have them? Do I not have them? Do I need to find them? Right? And it's almost the same motion, but it's in reverse. And once that concept was presented, all the marketers like, this is the one thing that we've been missing. Imagine CEO, CFO, CRO, if we just had this tool. If we put this tool in place, it's going to do all these wonderful things. We're going to sell faster. So everybody went out, bought some tools on borrowed trust, just to find out that, yeah, the tool will work. It will show everything you need to show to people. However, there is another element of how to consume the output and deal with more data than you had before and concise it in a way that allows salespeople to prioritize, whether it's account scoring, like, multiple things. And what people, when the declaration was made by the same Forrester recently that ABM is really on decline, I think what they meant to say is not that ABM is on decline. I mean, it's your methodology. Nobody says to DevOps, hey, Agile is on decline. No, people understand that. It's just a methodology, right? But it's, how well equipped are you to get the most out of it? How well equipped are you to consume all of the signals that may or may not be in one place, may or may not stream into, one single pane of glass view? How well trained are your people to understand the data that's populating all these endless fields in Salesforces or HubSpots or whatever? How well integrated is your tech stack? Are you even seeing things from the omni-channel, the proverbial omni-channel, right? Of you doing things in multiple places. And I think that's where the challenge is, where people see the tactics, people see the motions, but they struggle to reconcile all of that and figure out, so what do I do with this now?
So that's such a great summary. And what I want to do is I want to correct something I said early on, because it's a really important thing to understand. I said that sellers are lagging. It's marketers that are lagging. I just want to make that really clear. And the reason I'm saying that is because quite often this idea of leads is the simplest possible thing that marketers can attach to. Sellers have been doing this for a long time. They don't go and sell to one person, especially with a large enterprise motion. ConverMind sells to organizations that are big and data savvy and somewhat complex, right? They're not selling to one person that came through as a lead. So I just wanted to correct that, make it really clear. Quite often it's marketing that is the laggard. In this case for you, Nadia, Pay It, it's a little bit different. It is really sort of bringing the sellers along. And you nailed this idea, which is, the sellers are selling to buying units, and they're selling and understanding the complexity and managing these large deals. Like, these are brilliant project managers, if you will, inherently. But you're still nailing the problem, which is, okay, now great. We have this idea of account-based. We have this idea of account-based marketing. It's been around for a while, but the tools aren't catching up to assist the sellers so they can be effective. And there's this switching cost and sort of accumulation of things that they have to be able to manage in order to be successful. So I just want to correct that. It's not the sellers that are laggards. Typically, it's marketing. So Misha, you see this from a different perspective. Nadia's front line, you're sort of back in the background, helping lots of companies like Nadia's company manage this transition. I'm going to ask you in a little bit to just sort of comment on what that data journey looks like. How do we pull that data together? But before you do that, I would be really curious to hear from you. Do you see this fairly commonly, that organizations are coming to CaliberMind and struggling with some sort of transition, either a cultural transition around the importance of the lead, or just a transition in general about how to manage their data well?
Yeah, you'll be amazed how many conversations we still have where the focus is MQLs, and it is all about that one single source, where the notion of a buyer journey being complex and a multi-persona journey exists. You can tell these are intelligent marketers that are saying this, and at the same time, the metrics by which they are measuring and would like to be reflected in their system are all single person based. So I think that there are, and not very, it's quite rare, I think, to be able to explain it as well as Nadia just did, which is take a concept that's could be fairly complex and distill it into its parts of, like, this is not terribly complex. I mean, in today's data landscape, it can become so because it can become overwhelming. which is why I think the marketing ops, or really the owners of this data, I think it's our responsibility to take this challenge of a lot of information and distill it into something much simpler, much more usable for sales. So to answer your question, yes, we see this a lot. I think we see a lot of companies still on this journey, and yeah, it's finding the right data, it's processing, it's delivering it, but and then it's, I think, forming that conversation internally, because sometimes speaking different languages there, right? The marketing and sales teams, because it is all about the transition of accounts from one team to the other with proper context.
Okay, that's great, and that's exactly sort of what I was hoping we would lead to, because I want to go back to Nadia. And Nadia, you mentioned it, and I'm not going to name the analyst because I have a huge amount of respect, and I think he's mostly right. But the analyst that declared the end of the MQL recently also commented on the death of account-based marketing, right? And you and I, when we were chatting about this yesterday, we were sort of frustrated. We were like, okay, really? And I think you nailed it, talking about this idea that agile as a methodology is going away. And so sort of the point you made yesterday, which I want to emphasize and just have you comment on, what's happened with ABM is it's sort of taken over as the go-to-market motion, especially for organizations that are selling to other organizations that are big and complex and have a lot of buyers and a lot of sort of moving parts in a deal cycle. And so I want to go back sort of to this challenge that you're facing, which is this idea of how do I help sellers have, if you will, at least some sort of consolidated view into an account so that they can pursue this idea of account-based marketing?
There's a lot to unpack there, really, Doug. And I love that Misha brought sourcing, right? Because when you think about a go-to-market motion within any business, it's really a cross-business exercise. And of course, your board is involved. If you have a board, it's a lot of people that really have to, that you have to help flip the script on understanding of how marketing works. And most of these people are not marketers. When us marketing geeks look at all of the metrics, right? The clicks, the percentages, the engagement rates, the visits, the events that fire in Google Analytics, we just get so giddy and excited. Look at this rocket that I built to go into space. It's working. I've never done this before in the current ecosystem. It's working. It's amazing. Well, the board doesn't care. The senior leadership doesn't care. They care, how do you tie that to dollars? Because they measure their success in dollars. And, they may still understand sourcing as something that starts with a person. I've been in those jungles, right? Like, okay, where do our opportunities come from? Let's look at all these people and how we touch them. Well, what if it's the person number 5 that you touched and you miss people number 1, 2, and 4 because your filters were set up wrong, right? But I truly empathize for the sellers specifically, because us geeky marketers, loving technology, we understand what all of this is and where it all is because we created all of this. But the sellers don't live in this world. They do not necessarily distinguish about a click-through rate and a view-through rate and landing page versus, solutions page and all of those kind of nuanced definition-driven things, right? They just want to get to a list of quick-to-analyze actions that then they prioritize and go about with their day, because they're not measured on how well they orchestrated a flow or how well, their leading indicators are working. The board cares about the dollars. And Misha brought up the rise of kind of the operational function, the MarOps and the sales ops, as liaison to the world of complexity that comes from the data, from multiple signals, from all of the platforms. And by the way, that's only going to get worse. It's going to keep on going. So if you're not learning some SQL on the side, go start learning SQL on the side to pull stuff in Snowflake and all of that. But, the idea of this continuous learning on the marketing side is very much welcome. But it's not the same for all of the other teams that are part of the go-to-market motion, because to them, it's just not a part of their world. And when somebody says, the account-based marketing is in decline, it's not really in decline, but it's just something that it's almost like, actually, let me take that back. It's almost like saying, okay, yesterday you were excited about the socks to walk in, but really you need the shoes to walk in. The socks don't do it. So pick one or the other. No, you need both, because one folds into the other, but you have to drive education and provide the infrastructure and have a very strong operations function that helps people to come along, that educates people, that helps them with technology curves. Because On the sales side, nobody comes into an organization with a requirement to be a power user of Salesforce, for example, right? They ask you, do you know how to use Salesforce? Oh yeah, I used it in my previous work. Great. But Salesforce is a rabbit hole. It's like Alice through Wonderland, Curiosier and Curiosier, right? Depends what organization you're in. And all the insights get flown in there. But how do you distill it all? And I think that's the conversation. How do we help people to, how do we deliver the single pane of glass? How do we help them along, give them the education that they may not necessarily have the time for or the desire for to pursue on their own? How do we make it simple? Which is, a requirement for any marketing organization. Take complex concepts, distill them down into something that's simple and ready to act on. And right now we're in transition because we're working through the complexity of everything. Thank you, Google, for changing everything else all the time, from GA to GA4 to everything else that's coming further down the line, right? But it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I was sort of giggling when you were talking about, marketing building these magnificent machines and being so proud of them, because on a weekly basis here at Caliber, we have this account-based marketing meeting where we're coordinating with our sales team. And quite often a big part of the meeting is where the sellers check out, because we're sort of giving all these early indicators of, hey, these are the things we're looking at that are likely to produce pipeline. But the key to your point is we're not going and we're done. We're saying, how do we sort of tweak the machine and tweak the machine and tweak the machine so it is producing pipeline? And that's our constant strive. But there are times when I feel like that team's just like, I have no idea what you're talking about with me. And I should boil it down and go, it is highly likely you're going to get more pipeline. Good. Thank you for that information. We appreciate it. So Nadia, I think Misha, Misha, I think Nadia's done a great job of setting you up for what I want the audience to understand, which is, what Nadia is dealing with is what we deal with as a brand, as a platform, as a services organization all the time, which is helping organizations make this data transition. So without scaring people, please, Misha, don't scare anybody. Can you walk us through and sort of talk about how we get to the point that we can present something like I'm going to show here shortly, which is new functionality in Caliber, not released to customers yet. Sorry if you see this and get excited. But Misha, can you kind of set up what this journey looks like that Nadia's on and how we help folks get there?
Yeah, absolutely. The landscape, there's no doubt, is complex. What Nadia noted, that there's no way back. There's probably going to be only more and more information. But the output, or the ask, is fairly straightforward. Help me prioritize my day. If I were to sit down and start calling or sending emails today, help me send the messages, help me get in touch with those that have the highest probability to speak to me, to be for our solution to be for them in a timely manner, right? So, and then give me context. And I think for both of these, it is possible. I truly believe that data can help in making this difficult environment result in fairly simple, straightforward signals that would help sales take these steps. We spoke about this a bit yesterday, but one pillar is, I think, proper scoring. And this is what we're talking about, MQAs, and finding data-driven methodologies to prioritize accounts, removing some of the human bias from scoring, right? So making sure the scores are rooted in something that happened, yesterday. So something that's at least historically driven in outcomes, as opposed to a webinar is, worth 3 points and a click is worth 1, because you can get a lot of really, a lot of false positives through not very high intent signals. So that's one. I think if that's done well, you can help create that order for the sales org. And the second one is providing context. We've seen that, and our product has evolved this way as well, where we provided you the entire event stream of an organization's activities. And a sales rep would open that and there would be 600 lines. And their eyes would just glaze on page 3 when they see the last 3 pages have been, clicks. And you say, okay, how do I translate it into something? How do I even go about writing an email from this? And that's where luckily there's been some interesting kind of technologies, and the rise of Gen AI certainly helped here. There are ways to summarize. So one, it's a data problem, And then the next step is, okay, now that we have something cleaner, standardized, normalized, can we then summarize it to make sure that the day is even more efficient for the sales team?
Well, and I think I should have amended my comment, which is please scare people that have self-builds, which I think you've done well, Misha, right? Because there's just so much for it. And I've done several self-builds, as you know, Misha, we've had those discussions before.
Yep.
And, they get rickety and they get very brittle, if you will, especially as you introduce new tools.
Sure.
So I'm going to bring it back to Nadia, and then I'm going to spend a little time in something called Ask Cal in Caliber Mind. So Nadia, you used the word yesterday that I thought was just a perfect representation of what you're trying to deal with, which is orchestration, right? So you're sort of in the midst of helping orchestrate. Tell us a little bit of what that journey is like. What are you doing currently to help create, I don't know if it's a need for a singular view, but just having better information in front of sellers more quickly?
I love that marketing finally adopted the concept of orchestration, right? I came out of the world of IT automation and orchestration, and that term was coined by Gartner. And once Gartner says something, that's the front page of every report. But it totally applies in the world of marketing, because do you have multiple sources of in-person, programmatic, third-party partnerships through lists and things of that nature? Of course you do. You separate your budget into those buckets. And once you bring all of this in, you kind of deal with, well, for some people, and I was at an event, which was performance marketing event, and people were talking about the tech stack. Like, a lot of people shyly raised their hands saying, yeah, my tech stack is not all that great. I don't really know what's in there. Like, somebody tells me it's all good and I just take their word and go with it, right? So your tech stack is a huge piece of what flows where and what doesn't, because it's either giving you a 360-degree view of things or it doesn't. And then the question becomes, once you have outputs from that tech stack, from all of the things, some of it comes through as reports in your email. Some of it goes into, for example, a campaign object type of view in Salesforce. Some of it goes into an iframe on the account object type of view. Some of it is a HubSpot or Marketo activity that you can scroll on, and it just says email open, email open, email open. So sitting on the sales side, you see all of that and you're like, I hate my marketing people, what they're doing to me, right? This is not fair. Totally. But, it takes time to go through all of the motions to bring this all together. And sometimes maybe you spend the time and you realize, oh, well, this account kind of shows interest, but I don't think they're ready for me to call. Let me try another account. Before you know it, it's lunchtime. So, the notion here is like, how do I effectively bring all of this together if I know where these things are? But sometimes you don't. Like the Google AdWords, the proverbial Google AdWords that just kind of live on the island of their own. Then you have the closed LinkedIn API and the lily pad of LinkedIn that shows you clicks and click-through rates that never match Google Analytics. Come on, man, can't you guys figure this out, right? But those are the silos. And once you orchestrate those, and better in one view, ideally, and I know multiple tools are trying to do that. And there's a variety of tools that, depending on your technical capabilities, you as the owner of either demand gen or revenue marketing or marketing operations function, you can bring on, whether it's too complex and your team cannot handle that, or it's too simple, like it's your call to decide, right? But I know there's that desire in the market to simplify all of that. And the businesses on the other side, they disregarded the operations function yesterday as like, we don't know what these people are doing. Why would I pay for the headcount? Today, they're realizing that my people need help. They can do nothing. They're pretty much paralyzed. It's deer in the headlights once you see those endless lines, to Misha's point, in the activity log, right? So it's kind of a dual motion right now. Simplify this, get the concept of orchestration wrapped around everyone's mind, and bring the resources to help us get there and stitch it all together.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to ask that we show Caliber Mind software here. We're going to pop a screen up. But before we get there, one thing I want to talk about here is that, I really thought, oh, please go ahead and show the screen. But one thing I want to talk about is that I really thought orchestration was going to take over the world for MOPS, Nadia. And what ended up happening is that we started consolidating tech stacks in the face of recession within the tech industry, right? So keep that in mind, folks. Orchestration is next. It's going to be a huge thing once you get through the consolidation phase. So Nadia, you were talking really about this idea of data and its utility for marketers versus sales, right? And we talked about how quite often we build these beautiful machines, we marketers, and it's just full of leading indicator data. But there is a point where that data crosses over and becomes high utility data for sellers, right? Because this is happening at an account level. So what I'm showing right now is something called Ask How. It is a part of our development. So this is sandbox for us. This is not a part of the regular product. But this is code we're working on live, and it's something we're seeking feedback from customers pretty quickly. And what this does, and what I'm showing you here is actually the CalBromine AI summary, or Ask How. And what it's doing is it is summarizing a huge amount of engagement data for a particular account. But what I want to do is to show you how much data really this is summarizing. And you can see, I'm going to scroll through this. And this is to your point, Nadia, right? It's like, good luck putting this in front of a seller going, okay, tell me who the buying unit is. Tell me what the buying journey is. And let us know really at this point what you should do in terms of making sure you've got, say, more people in the buying unit, or what your next action should be. Misha mentioned potentially sending an email. I'm doing just a quick scroll. Like, I wouldn't put this in front of a seller. The seller wouldn't use this data, right? So what do we do? And how do we really help sellers? And again, this gets back to this idea of to the degree we can create it now for marketers, for sellers rather, how do we have a singular view into an account? And so what this does is it takes all of that engagement data, and Misha sort of talked about how we prepare that data so that it is useful, in this case, for sellers. And what it does is says, okay, based on our engagement data, this is who we're seeing your buying group to be. And the first time I saw this, I was like, right? So if I am a sales leader, I'm able to, let's just, like, poor sellers, if I'm a sales leader, I can go and look at your account and be like, have you talked to this person? Because this looks like a really important element, and they're showing up on the website. When's the last time you talked to them? What's their role? Could they potentially be a coach? Are they an economic buyer? So you have this sort of view as a sales manager, but also the seller. And by the way, folks, we really have nothing but great sellers out there these days. We've had such market compression that we've really got amazing sellers that are great at using data like this. They can see the buying group. They can also see, key marketing activities. The other piece here that I think is incredibly helpful for both marketers and for sellers, this sort of idea of crossover, is that you can see the entire buyer journey. And when you're incorporating intent data, you're not just seeing the buyer journey we can see, you're seeing sort of their investigation process outside of your four walls. We use a lot of intent data. We use Bombora data. We use G2 data. We use data from Clearbit. And we use de-anonymization to really, really help sort of punch through the noise at the top of the funnel. And you can see that here. So that's the idea behind Ask How. Misha, I want to take it back to you because you've been really instrumental in setting this up and sort of helping guide how this is delivered to customers. How are you seeing sort of customers reacting to it, and how do you expect it to really help this journey that Nadia is currently on?
Yeah, I think the excitement that you noted certainly exists there. There are many solutions out there that Nadia noted this notion of presenting something that's easily digestible. And there are many solutions out there that give you like these accounts are green, go target these accounts today. They're really hot. But I have found that sales organizations came back and said, we're really not seeing, like, says who, and like, no, we have this solution and they have this methodology and it's perfect. They might even be fairly, large organizations, because I think the appetite is there. There's certain appetite for the startup solution, and sales just, I think, loses confidence after making a few calls and realizing that the signals they're getting there's a mismatch between what I'm being given. The nice thing here is this is all third party. This is all first party. I apologize. And so it is an exercise of proper mapping, of normalizing the data. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes to make this happen. But the output are actual people with actual actions that were taken in a specific order. You can see buying committees. Soon enough, I'm sure you'll see buying committees of organizations that look like this, right? So all of a sudden, I think this becomes much more actionable. And again, seeing the excitement, I'm personally very excited about the ability to translate data into layman terms. That, I think, is the holy grail, really, of the transition of the cooperation between marketing and sales.
And if we can simply provide a singular view, I think that helps Nadia, your organization. I think that helps others just make this transition, because ultimately I think orchestration still has a really big role here, because there's a lot more data certainly we can put in front of sellers, Nadia, you can, that would help things out. And so I'm just going to mention, we're sort of playing with this idea of, can we take this and turn this to an email that a seller can send? Obviously, this would be safe for an account that maybe is sniffing around, meaning they're showing engagement but haven't really contacted a seller or spent some time with a seller. So Nadia and Misha, I really appreciate your spending time with me again today. And Nadia, thank you for sharing your experiences. I agree with you. ABM is not dead, by the way. I think that we've got a long journey with ABM. It's simply now just sort of de facto what we're doing as marketers these days.
That's amazing news for Friday. We all have jobs on Monday.
That's fantastic. I like having jobs on Mondays after Fridays. I think that's a great way to look at the world. Okay, folks, this wraps up this episode of the Funnel Lab Fridays. Next week, we're going to have Jordan Crawford on from Blueprint Go-to-Market. Jordan's been on the show before. We're going to talk about how we're creating ICP on the fly using data. If you guys recall, we used to build ICP through a lot of qualitative and quantitative analysis that would take a lot of time. We're in a spot now these days where we're likely to be able to create ICPs on the fly. Look also for buyer personas that can be created on the fly. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.